Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got 10 more infinite or game-winning combos using foundations. Some of these are old reprints, some of these are new cards, some of them are legal and standard, some in older formats, some even in limited or sealed deck that you could get these infinite game-winning combos off. So let's jump right into it. And the first one is the Drog Skull Reaver with the Starving Revenant. Now, Skull Reaver is a reprint here, which is a 7-mana spirit, which is a 3/5 flying double strike lifelink. So, pretty decent creature in it. But most importantly, it says whenever you gain life, you draw a card. Now, whenever you kind of see that on a card, whenever something happens, you can draw a card. You kind of want to look for the opposite. Now, you could play this with Shieldred to kind of draw infinite cards, but that would essentially deck you. But if you do play it with Starving Revenant, and you have Descend 8, because Starving Revenant says whenever you draw a card, if there's 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This is going to create an infinite loop between the two of these creatures, so that whenever you gain life, you're drawing a card. Whenever you're drawing a card, you're gaining life and your opponent is losing life. So this creates an infinite loop where you have infinite card draw, essentially, for as many cards that are left in your deck, infinite life gain for as many cards that are left in your deck, and infinite life loss for your opponent. So most importantly, that your opponent is going to lose the game as you continue to go through this loop. So this is an interesting combo and could be played in standard in the same deck. Might be challenging to get it off because both these creatures don't really have too much protection for them, and especially the Drog Reaver is quite expensive. So how potentially competitive this combo is, I'm not really sure. But it could be interesting. You also need the condition of having 8 permanents in your graveyard, so maybe in some sort of mill deck, this could be useful. You could get this off, but you do kind of need a little extra help to kind of make this combo work. Also, you do need to have drawn a card or gain a life to start this. You do, naturally draw a card every turn. So if you have both of these out, and then you may have to pass the turn to draw a card. However, if you have the Starving Revenant out as the second one, his first ability lets you surveil and then draw cards. So that could start the combo if you have Descend 8 and both these out and you play the Revenant as the second creature. So something to consider with this infinite combo, but definitely kind of cool and interesting to think about anyways. Okay, next up we've got Aurelia the War Leader, which is a 6-mana 3/4 angel with flying, vigilance, and haste. And it says whenever it attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So this goes infinite if you can create a copy token of it, and if you have Geared, the Mirror of the Wilds. Geared says it lets your non-token creatures you control tap to create a token that's a copy of the token that entered the battlefield this turn. So if you are able to create a token copy of Aurelia, there's lots of many different ways to do this in standard, but one of them is like kind of on color, is Electra Duplicate, which is another new one. But there's many other ways to kind of create token copies of creatures. But if you had Electra Duplicate, you created a copy of Aurelia, you keep the copy because it's legendary, and you have Gear It out. You can attack with the first one, and then get the trigger to create an additional combat step. And then if you make another copy of it, the copy will actually, during combat, the copy will then let you'll get another combat step, and then the copy will let you attack again and trigger it again because it's the first time that the copy has attacked. So you can sort of go infinite with this, infinite attack steps, infinite Aurelias attacking for 3 each time if they don't have anything to interrupt this. This is a lot of mana and probably maybe challenging to pull off in standard, but let me know in the comments. Maybe there's other ways. What's like the best way to create a token copy of Aurelia that might be cheaper to get this combo going? And you have to have Geared live as well. But definitely a potentially powerful combo nonetheless. Okay, next up we've got the Good Fortune Unicorn, which is a 3-mana 2/2, and it says whenever another creature you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. Now, this works with persist creatures particularly well in Modern. There's one that's like a zombie that's legal on Arena, but what this lets you do is if a persist creature dies, it says it comes back, for example, the Kitchen Finks, which is kind of on color here. If it dies, it comes back with a -1/-1 counter on it. Now, the Good Fortune Unicorn will replace that -1/-1 counter with a +1/+1 counter. So that will negate the -1/-1 counter. Now all you need is to have some way to infinitely sacrifice your persist creature for a payoff, or if the persist creature has a come into play ability like the Kitchen Finks, you'll gain infinite life with these two cards. If you have any way to infinitely sacrifice a creature, for example, Alter Dementia is a pretty cheap way, and it would also let you mill your opponent out if you had all of these out, and this would be legal again in Modern. There's another persist creature in Historic, I believe, on Arena, so you could do the combo that way. Okay, next up we've got the 9 Lives Familiar. This is a really cool new card. 3 mana for a 1/1 cat, and it says it enters with 8 revival counters on it if you cast it. And when this creature dies, if it has a revival counter on it, return to the battlefield with 1 fewer revival counter on it at the beginning of next end step. So this combo's pretty cool, pretty well with All Will Be One, which says whenever a counter is put on a permanent, it does that much damage to target opponent or a creature that the opponent controls or a planeswalker. So with a 9 Lives Familiar, it enters with 8 counters, right? And so if you have any way to sacrifice it, then it'll come back at the end step with 7 counters, and then you could do that during your opponent's turn as well, because it's any end step, and then it would come back during your opponent's end step to do 6. So, for example, if you had All Will Be One, you play the 9 Lives Familiar, you do 8 to your opponent, you sacrifice it, for example, to Bart. Bart would actually get, it puts a plus counter on the Bart, so that would also give you an extra damage. But the 9 Lives Familiar itself would come back, do 7 to your opponent, and then you could do that during your opponent's turn with Bart, because you can do it any time at instant speed, and it would come back again and deal 6. So that could be a pretty cool, almost instant, it would within one turn cycle way of doing more than 20 damage to your opponent. Okay, next up we've got Swiftfoot Boots and the Herald of Eternal Dawn. This is kind of a classic combo with can't lose the game effect. So Herald of Eternal Dawn is a 7 mana 6/6 angel with flash and flying, and it says you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win the game. And Swiftfoot Boots is an equipment that gives any creature hexproof and haste and equip for 1. So essentially, if you go Herald of Dawn and equip it to the Swiftfoot Boots, that is a total of like 8 mana. But that would sometimes, depending on your opponent's deck, just instantly win you the game. Not always. If they have some sort of sweepers, or if they have ways to make you sacrifice a creature, that would be a way to get around it. But this does present a pretty fast clock too, because a 6/6 flyer will end the game pretty quickly. And for some decks, this will just end the game immediately. If all they have is sort of go for the throats as removal, which many decks do, but some decks have ways to kind of get around this lock. But against other decks, this could potentially be a way to just win, especially like red decks that only have burn spells. That would be kind of an instant win against them. So something to consider, sort of the old Angel Abunis combo. If any of the old boomers are watching this, they remember that combo where you gave the Angel that you couldn't lose the game hexproof. That would be kind of similar to that. Okay, next up we've got Preposterous Proportions, which is a 7 mana sorcery. And it says creatures you control get +10/+10 vigilance on a turn. So not a great card on rate necessarily. I mean, you are kind of pumping up your creatures a lot, but I was thinking of how could you kind of cheat this into play? How could you kind of get around this really high casting cost of 7 mana? And Collector's Cage is kind of nice because it wants you to kind of play in a token deck. Collector's Cage, if you're not sure what that does, it has Hideaway 5, so you look at the top 5 when it comes to play, and then you can put one of those face down, exiled. And then if you meet the requirement, which is to have 3 or more creatures with different powers, you can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So both these cards kind of want you to play in like a token strategy, but the Collector's Cage would essentially let you play the Preposterous Proportions as early as turn 3. If you went turn 1, played 1 creature, turn 2 played 2 creatures that had different power, and then if you turn 3 played the Collector's Cage, got lucky, of course, get the Preposterous Proportions underneath it, activate it, and then pump up one of your creatures, and then pump up all 3 of your creatures. That could be an attack for like 30. Even if they have 1 blocker, at least 20 damage would get through. So that's kind of the idea. Maybe this is worth kind of playing around in the token deck. It's kind of maybe just more fun just to think about what you could do with Preposterous Proportions. I don't know how competitive that is, but that was the way I thought maybe you could win with it in an instant win way, kind of as early as turn 3. Of course, if you have like more tokens on turn 4, this could kind of get out of hand and attack for a ton of damage. Okay, next up we've got the Banner of Kinship, which is a 5-mana artifact, and it says when it enters, you choose a creature type. This artifact enters with a fellowship counter for each creature of the chosen type. Creatures you control the chosen type get +1/+1 for each fellowship counter on the artifact. Now, this is a really cool new artifact that works well with sort of kinship and tribal decks. Elves or goblins, things like that. However, I was thinking of Release the Dogs, which is another card in this set, which is pretty cool. I think it's legal in limited, I believe. I could be wrong about that because it's hard to see. Like some of them come in the booster, some of them don't. But I think this is like limited. You could get this in sealed deck. But if you have Release the Dogs on turn 4, for example, you make 4 dogs, and if you played the Banner of Kinship right after you name dog, all of them would get +4/+4, so that would be a nice clean attack. Each of them would be 5/5 dogs. 4 times 5 is 20 exactly, so that could be a nice attack for 20. If your opponent didn't see that one coming, that could be pretty cool. That would really be a surprise who let the dogs out here. So obviously, I think this card could see play in other tribal decks, but I thought that was a fun kind of 2-card combo that does exactly 20 damage. All right. Next up, we've got Doubling Season, which is back. Everyone's favorite card. It's a pretty sweet card. Gotta enjoy it. It is a 5-mana enchantment. It says the effect would create one or more tokens under your control. Creates twice that many tokens. And if effect would put one or more counters on a permanent, it puts twice that many counters. So this works really well with the new Ajani. Well, it's actually not a new Ajani, but it's a reprint, new to standard Ajani, with its ultimate. So if you have a Doubling Season and you play Ajani out, it goes right up to 8 loyalty counters. You can -8 it, and then it will double the number of cats you create. So let's say your life total was at 10, right? You would create 20 2/2 cats. Now let's say you had another way to kind of give all those cats haste, for example, and during courage, that would be an attack for, I don't even know, a ton of damage, 40, 80 damage, something like that. Um, that would be a lot of damage coming at your opponent and kind of an instant win right there. Just the 2 cards, Doubling Season and Johnny, might just win the game. It would leave you vulnerable to like a sweeper. But if you had a way to give them all haste, there's other ways to kind of give them all haste, of course, but Enduring Courage would be kind of a fun one to just kind of instantly win the game with Doubling Season and a Johnny. Okay, next up we've got this classic combo of Demonic Pact and Harmless Offering. Demonic Pact is a 4-mana enchantment. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, choose one that hasn't been chosen. It does 4 damage to a target and gain 4 life. Target opponent discards 2 cards, draw 2 cards, and you lose the game. So you probably don't want to choose that last one. However, if you do the first 3, you're forced to do the last one, which is where Harmless Offering comes into play. This is sort of a classic combo. If you're not aware of this, this is coming to standard. Both of these cards are now legal in standard, or will be as soon as Foundations releases. So you can pay 3 to essentially donate it, give the Demonic Pact to your opponent. Once you've used the first 3 modes, then your opponent has to choose the last mode during their upkeep, so they just lose right away during their upkeep, which is pretty cool. So I think this would be a fun one to try in standard. I'm not sure how competitive it might be. I used to see a little bit of competitive play, I know, at one point, but definitely a fun combo to try and see if you can get the 1-2 punch going with Demonic Pact and Harmless Offering. So there are other cards maybe in standard that you might want to Harmless Offering. Let me know if there's other ones you can think of, but there's the Demon that has the oil counters on it. I can't remember the name right now. The name is slipping my mind, but when it runs out of oil counters, you lose the game. You could donate that once that runs. Gets down to 1 oil counter, donate that, and then maybe that's another way to use Harmless Offering. So this could potentially see play in a standard deck. I wouldn't be surprised if people tried this. All right, and last up, we've got a new turn 1 kill, which I posted this on Twitter a couple days ago, got a lot of hits. People seem to really enjoy turn 1 kills. This one is only legal in modern. No turn 1 kills in standard. There are turn 2 kills, of course, in standard, but which is kind of crazy to say. But this is a turn 1 kill in modern, which uses the new Fervent Champion, not the new Fervent Champion, the new Leyline Axe with Fervent Champion and the newish Leyline of Resonance. So what you do is you play Mountain and then Fervent Champion on turn 1. It has first strike and haste, and most importantly, this last ability is that you can use equipment cards cost 3 less to activate. So the Leyline Axe, which would come into play for free on turn 1, and the Leyline Resonance, which comes to play on turn 1 or turn 0, really, you can equip the Leyline Axe for free to the Fervent Champion. That gives you a 2/2 double strike. Now, if you have mutagenic growths, stick with me. This could happen. Pretty unlikely that this will ever happen. But the mutagenic growths with Leyline of Resonance each do +4, +4, right? So if you cast 2 of them on the Fervent Champion, it would then be a 10/10 double strike haste on turn 1. And that requires 6 cards. You actually don't even need the second mountain. That could be any other card. But this is possible to get a turn 1 kill in modern or any older format where all these cards are illegal. So just thought I'd point that out, and people seem to be enjoying that combo. And maybe you could brew around that if you wanted to make a crazy all-in combo deck in modern with that combo in mind. But yeah, let me know what you're thinking about for new cool combos with foundations in standard and any other format. Commander, limited. There's some cool combos even in the limited format, which is always exciting. And yeah, let me know what you think about what do you want to brew for the new set. So I will be having new content, new gameplay content coming up pretty soon on the channel with all the Foundations cards, brewing a bunch of new combo decks, and kind of seeing what's good. So stick to the channel if you enjoy combos. I mostly play standard. Sometimes I will play other formats on Arena. I got some brews going in Explorer now, and I think they're actually going to release a bunch of new Explorer cards too, to make it more like Pioneer, to make it essentially Pioneer. So that's exciting. So yeah, maybe some historic decks, but we'll see. Let me know in the comments what you're excited about. Maybe if you have any suggestions for combo decks you want me to build or that you're excited to build yourself, just let me know. So appreciate you watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.